I really think the most impactful thing on my journey, because I went from being bedridden last year to now thriving on 2-hour hikes, and it's fully because of pacing strategies. And so many of my clients have had incredible transformation stories. But the first step is always allowing ourselves to rest. And it's that level of self-compassion that so many of us struggle with, because we're not taught that. We live in a hustle culture. We've grown up being taught that our worth is attached to how productive we are. And honestly, if you ask anyone how they're doing, everyone's response is typically, I'm busy, as if that's like a badge of honor.
Howdy, everyone. It's your host, Polly Siegel. And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, certified addiction specialist, and master level trained mindfulness practitioner. I own a counseling practice in both Colorado and Illinois, and I specialize in trauma, OCD, and anxiety. If you live in either of those two states, feel free to reach out to me for a consultation, and we can begin the therapeutic journey together. Now on to the good shit. Welcome to season 3 of Shit Talkin' Shrinks. Gosh, I'm so excited. I will be featuring experts in the healing space, and we're discussing a variety of mental health topics, the human experience, and society at large, while creating levity along the way. Get ready to laugh, learn a lot, and change your life for good. Hello, everyone. I have a very, very special guest today, one that does such incredible work that, again, so I guess, how do I explain your magical work? You help individuals that struggle with chronic illness be able to achieve a life filled with vitality and be able to thrive even though there's so much hardship when it comes to chronic illness. So today we're talking to Emily Fraser, who is a chronic illness advocate and works with individuals called Spoonies. Am I saying that right?
Yeah.
Which no one probably knows what that means. So we will get into it and define it, but help Spoonies live their best life. So thank you, Emily, for joining us or joining me.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, no, I'm really excited to be here and raise awareness about what a Spoonie is, because honestly, everyone could identify as a Spoonie, and it really means someone who has low energy, who needs to count their spoons, aka energy, wisely in order to complete everyday tasks. So there's obviously a wide variety of types of Spoonies, but I personally became a Spoonie after sustaining a brain injury in 2018. And so it just really opened my eyes. Even taking a shower it felt like running a marathon. So I quickly discovered the whole Spoonie world and used it as a method for pacing and using my energy wisely. And it really is just a huge community that if you don't know about it and you do struggle with chronic fatigue or chronic illness, there are so many people around the world who identify as Spoonies, and you can just search the hashtag and get connected to an incredible group.
You know, it's really funny, and I have to bring some levity to this, but I love how we both have our animals in the video. You've got your cat, I've got my pooch, just some animal love. But when I first heard the term Spoonie, I thought it was like a BDSM term. I was like, oh, this is definitely involving some dom/sub shit.
Well, it's so funny because I eventually got on Instagram and started sharing my recovery journey. I had been a teacher before, a band and choir teacher, and I kept coming across posts that really resonated, and they always had the hashtag Spoonie or Spoonie life or spoon theory. And I was like, what is this? So I eventually started researching and then figured out that a chronic illness blogger, Christine Miserandino, in 2004 had come up with the concept of spoon theory because she was out at lunch with a friend, and her friend was trying to understand how she copes with lupus. And like, she understood that going out was really tough and that some days she had more energy than other days, but there were a bunch of spoons around. So Christine was like, okay, well, go through your day. And it's like, get out of bed. Okay, she took away 2 spoons. Take a shower. She took away a lot of spoons. And it's like, you never know how many spoons you're going to start the day with or what type of tasks need things. Like for me, I couldn't unload the dishwasher for years because it took so many spoons. And so there's just cute expressions like, oh, my spoons are in the dishwasher, or I'm all out of spoons. Or if someone's struggling with something, you say, sending spoons. And it really what we're saying is that we're disabled, but there's so much ableism in the world and internalized ableism that a lot of people don't want to view themselves as disabled. And I get it. So Spooniehood is a way to make it a bit more palatable as someone is understanding what their chronic health condition means for them.
Right, right. And if you can, for anyone who's curious about what does it mean to have chronic illness, how would you define chronic illness?
Yeah, so I mean, it's really misleading even for people who have chronic illnesses. Technically, in the medical world, the word chronic simply means that symptoms like, and it varies depending on the diagnosis, but it could be headaches, it could be severe pain, it could be irritability, mood swings, severe fatigue, and migraines. Like, there's just so many different symptoms people have experienced, but technically chronic means that your symptoms have persisted for more than 3 months. But how most people interpret the word chronic is you're going to be sick forever and there's no cure. Which, unfortunately, if you get diagnosed with something like long COVID or fibromyalgia or MS, all these different diagnoses, you look online and you see the word chronic and it's just this doom and gloom of, I'm going to be sick forever, there's no cure. And it's so incredibly terrifying and isolating that that's why I do the work I do, to help people realize, like, you are not stuck. You do not need to have a chronic condition. It's not going to last forever. It just means at a certain point, the pain shifts into a neurological pain. And there's just so many different ways to go about it and change your lifestyle to adapt. For example, I have a polycystic kidney disease as well, which is genetic. It runs in the family. And every family member who has had it has needed a kidney transplant and has had to do years of dialysis. But when I started implementing the strategies that I now teach in my programs, even though every single doctor has said this is like a degenerative condition, like your cysts in your kidneys will continue to grow until your kidneys fail, basically, I was like, I don't believe that's true for me. And ultimately, the last appointment I went with my nephrologist, my kidney doctor, my cysts, all my numbers have been improving, which is not supposed to happen. But it's really a great reminder of the power of mindset and pacing and lifestyle shifts and having a sense of community around you, the magic that can really occur.
Okay, so if I'm digesting what you've said, chronic illness is any sort of medical symptom that persists more than 3 months and causes basically limitations. Exactly.
And now I had post-concussion syndrome or a traumatic brain injury. And so it's not technically an illness. There's a lot of syndromes that exist in the world, but syndrome really just means that you have a collection of symptoms and doctors don't really know what it is, so they've called it a syndrome. So it's tricky because I like the word Spoonie because it captures a whole world of people that are dealing with chronic pain and fatigue, because there's a lot of people who are seeking a diagnosis, which can sometimes take years. Some people have an injury, like a broken leg or a brain injury. And some people have a disease or an illness that might be rare. It might be common, but it really brings people together. So it's not just the term chronic illness, but chronic illness has kind of become a blanket umbrella statement for anyone who struggles with chronic pain or fatigue.
Right. And I guess the definition is so expansive that it could be a sustained injury. It could be a syndrome, a disorder, an illness. Like Spoonie encompasses all the variants of that.
Exactly. Yeah. And mainly what tends to bring people who identify with the label chronic illness together is that the symptoms are invisible. So most people, if you were looking at someone, you can't tell if someone has a chronic illness. And that's why it's an incredibly isolating journey, because there were days where I could go to the grocery store and look fine, but I was still on disability leave. I was still in severe pain. There was so much going on behind what was visible, and it was a struggle, but it also makes it really hard for people to understand what we're going through. And so that's what brings people together in the Spoonie and chronic illness world, is the fact that we have invisible disabilities. And also because of that, so many people aren't aware that they are disabled, and that prevents us from being able to access really great resources and tools. Like, most of us think of the word disabled and we think of someone who has an impairment or who uses a mobility aid, for example. But people with chronic illness, even if it's a temporary illness or a temporary condition, you're still disabled. You're still severely limited in your ability to do things. And there are people who do use mobility aids within the Spoonie world. And sometimes they'll use a wheelchair and maybe the next day they'll stand up and be able to walk. And that can be really confusing to other people who don't identify as a Spoonie. But for us, it's about validating each other and saying, you know, what you're going through is real and you don't need to prove it to anyone else. Like, we see you.
You know, what's interesting as you're talking is, you know, I've struggled with chronic pain my whole life. I have a disorder called exertional compartment syndrome in both of my legs, and I've had 2 surgeries on it. So pain is sadly very familiar to me. And I have IBS, and, you know, add in a bunch of other Jewish shit to that. You know, let's sprinkle a little neuroticism in that. And I just never thought of myself as someone with chronic illness.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like this awareness or this maybe light bulb moment of like, technically, I am a Spoonie.
The beautiful thing about labels is that people can use them if it makes them feel empowered, or they can choose not to, right? So absolutely, you fit the criteria of a Spoonie, but there are lots of people who are fitting that criteria who don't resonate with that term. And that's okay too. But absolutely, IBS and Crohn's and all sorts of like autoimmune conditions, syndromes, they all fall under the bucket of Spoonie. But that's what's tricky about being in this whole world, is it's like, where do I belong? And a lot of times people have really rare conditions where it's like maybe harder to find Facebook support groups or your community of people on Instagram, for example. But when you use the term Spoonie, or some people call themselves zebras because they're like the rare disease club or rare condition club. So that's a helpful hashtag too. But it's just a way to feel less alone. And when I started running my group mentorship programs, people were like, well, is this going to work? Like, will I feel connected if everyone has a different condition? But I found that it doesn't matter what our diagnosis is. In fact, I really encourage people to stop living and identifying so strongly with their diagnosis and more about where they want to go and the fact that they're trying to build a life of joy alongside of their diagnosis. The story doesn't end when you get diagnosed.
Right. It's the journey ahead and how much resources you cultivate along the way so that you really can live the best life possible. So something, I don't know if you find this in your world, your field, because I know this is your bread and butter, but I would imagine that someone who is the classic Spoonie, right? Like has the disorder, it's chronic, it's persistent, it's haunted them their entire lives. If someone were to not have an official diagnosis, but just find that they're kind of more lethargic or tired, and they identify as a Spoonie, is there a little bit of discourse or tension between someone who's stereotypically more limited versus someone who's now latching on to this term, but maybe doesn't have the same criteria? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I would say that the Spoonie community is very inclusive, and it's really, to identify as a Spoonie, all you have to be is someone who manages their energy wisely. And like, I've had some close friends who have gone through burnout with work, and they don't even realize, like, okay, this is a valid thing. And I teach them all the strategies of Spoon theory, and whether they identify with the label or not, it's like, no, like, these strategies work for everyone. If you have ADHD, autism, like, it really is all encompassing of any mental, emotional, physical type of condition. But I would say, I mean, there's kind of 2 camps within the Spoonie community. You have, and I think it's all a spectrum that people journey through their growth. But some people find a label and they're like, finally, like, people who get that this is valid, and they want to live in the despair and the this sucks. So you'll see some Spoonie accounts that are all like, this sucks. My doctors are gaslighting me. I have so many, all these conditions. I can't afford things. And it's quite a limiting view. So that sometimes turns people away from the Spoonie community. Whereas I am really trying to forge a new path within the Spoonie community of, hey, this is actually an empowering thing. Being a Spoonie means we're using all of the tools and resources and evidence-based strategies to our advantage so that we can still do the things we love. And it's also about helping people feel proud about their diagnosis, which might sound weird at first, but eventually what's really interesting about Spooniehood is that most people are not born as Spoonies. Of course, some people are born with different conditions, but in my line of work, I tend to find that people get a sudden onset of worsening of symptoms. All of a sudden, the fast-paced, go-getter, high-achieving lifestyle that always worked for them doesn't work anymore because they have migraines, or they're suddenly so tired, or they're in an accident. And what really Spooniehood teaches them is that it's okay to rest, that rest is productive, it's not being lazy, and it's this whole journey of really coming home to themselves, which is what I teach all of my clients, that, hey, how can we actually view this diagnosis or this set of symptoms or this really tragic accident that has happened in your life? How can we reframe the narrative and view it as a place where we can really practice and foster our resilience?
Yeah, so it's sort of shifting from this sucks, I'm limited in this way, life is horrible, poor me, into a sense of empowerment and resilience and state of what can I do? Like, instead of looking at it as the deficits, it's about like, what is my mind, body, and spirit capable of doing, and can I maximize that?
Yeah, and it's like victim mentality is definitely a stage of being a Spoonie. And I went through it myself, and I remember having a therapist who told me that, and I was like, what the hell? And I like, was just like, this is not the right fit. Like, I felt so attacked. But years later, I was able to be like, oh, I was stuck in victim mentality and felt like, well, why is no one understanding what I'm going through? Because even concussions have like their own stereotype of like, I as a teacher just thought students use them to get out of exams, right? Until I experienced it myself, and I was like, holy crap. Like, there's no way for me to describe the debilitating fatigue and unpredictable symptoms that I'm navigating every single day, where like I couldn't even go for a walk for 5 minutes for years. And it's just so challenging, but And honestly, like navigating disability, and because so many people with chronic health conditions, they are invisible, applying for disability and getting approved is such a journey. And then most people are high achievers and people pleasers and perfectionists and codependents that they don't even feel like they can accept and receive support. So it's just this spiral that can be so hard to break free from. And that's why the community that I build around my programs is integral. Like, I really know that knowing that you're not alone is a huge part of the journey.
I want to take a quick pause to talk about our sponsor, a company called BetterHelp. It's an online therapy platform where all the therapists are licensed and accredited professionals. It's affordable. You pay a low flat fee for therapy with your therapist, and it's convenient. Do it at your own time and at your own pace, and you can communicate with your therapist as much as you want and whenever you feel is needed. And more importantly, it's effective. Thousands of people have benefited from therapy using BetterHelp, and we're really grateful to offer all of our listeners 10% off your first month. So if you're interested in receiving therapy ASAP, click the link in our show notes and you can get started. And you get to save money. Do you find that Spoonie or people in the community have been fetishized? Like, where you find that there are certain people that seek out being a caretaker and it becomes this caretaker Spoonie relationship that has like a romantic or sexual component to it?
I haven't seen that or experienced that myself. Most of what I see is that people who are in relationships before they suddenly become a Spoonie, they tended to be the one that was the caregiver and the overgiver. And when suddenly the dynamic shifts, it's like a very, very challenging aspect of the relationship, because you have one person who used to do everything who suddenly can't, and who needs to then receive support from the other person who has no idea how to give it, especially because learning how to self-advocate and clearly explain the symptoms is very challenging for people because we don't want to perceive ourselves as weak, right? That's the internalized ableism. We don't want to admit to ourselves that we can't do something. So that's why most people keep pushing and pushing and pushing and overdoing until they crash. And after months or years of doing that, your body just says enough, and it forces you to slow down. Like, it gives you no other option but to be stuck in bed. But yeah, I can't say that I've witnessed that. I know that a lot of people do struggle to find partnerships where people are accepting of the fact that they are limited in certain ways. So yeah, I'm sure it does exist. I definitely have seen some disabled models, like people who have POTS or dysautonomia. Like, there are models on Instagram, and they are definitely like riding the wave and taking advantage. Like, well, I don't know, I shouldn't say taking advantage, but they have huge followings. And I would say that that could be a fetish thing about, like, well, we know that statistically people who are disabled or disabled people are victims of horrible sexual assault because of the fact that they are not able to, just a wide range of reasons. One of them being, if you're stuck in a wheelchair, like, obviously avoiding that kind of attack is challenging.
Right. The reason it popped into my head is, my 600-pound life. And then I ended up going into a rabbit hole. And then there's this term called feeders. Are you familiar with this?
No.
Okay. So feeders are basically caretakers, or people that seek out people that live in larger bodies, and they want to encourage those people to continue to gain weight. And it becomes this very interesting romantic sexual connection. And so then naturally my brain was like, I wonder if it happens in the Spoonie community, but doesn't sound like that's known yet.
Take Care of Maya is a documentary that came out recently on Netflix. And that was exactly part of the issue. Like, Maya is a perfect example of a Spoonie, like having a complex condition where you're spending years and years trying to figure out what treatments will provide relief. And her mother was a nurse, and I just really encourage people to go watch it. But the issue was that people thought that Maya was acting sick in order to fill a need of her mother to want to be the caretaker. So it actually became a really horrible perspective of essentially not believing that Maya really was sick, which is so common in the Spoonie community. The number of people who just dismiss us and don't see that what we are struggling with is valid. And that is just, I had to go through a phase of realizing, like, I don't need to justify anything to anyone. Like, I can't keep waiting for people to show up and drop off food. Like, for example, when I was on medical leave from work, me and another friend who had a neurological condition, we were not receiving any support from the school. Whereas someone who had their appendix removed got flowers sent right away. And then someone who got diagnosed with cancer, immediately all of the parents set up a meal train and started delivering food. And I really do believe that that's because we all know someone who's been affected by cancer, or we can all realize a broken leg or a surgery is very challenging. And so it helped me realize that you can only really be empathetic to situations that you yourself have experienced, or someone close to you has experienced. So it was a way of me learning and growing, which I've tried to reframe the whole journey into of, not everyone's going to understand, and that's okay. Just like I'm not a mother yet, and now that I'm witnessing some of my closest friends and family become mothers, I'm like, oh, I didn't realize you're supposed to go over, wash your hands, drop off a casserole, and hold the baby and tell the mom to go shower. Like, I didn't know that that's like etiquette and what every new mother is looking for. So we kind of rely on people sharing stories in that way for us to learn. And that's why I do what I do now, because we need representation of disability pride and also another way to live.
And I think when you mentioned before, a lot of these experiences are invisible. There's naturally that skepticism. And I can only imagine how painful that is for people in the community where they're suffering day in and day out. And you have a bunch of people that are like, but is it really that bad?
Well, there's this whole thing been going on with TikTok lately of saying that teenagers are faking things in order to go viral. And like saying, for example, that they have Tourette's. And I don't know, I always really struggle with all of these kind of this discourse, because sure, there might be people in the world who are faking, but the vast majority of people are not faking. They're not trying to take advantage of a system. In fact, the systems are failing them. They're not getting the support they need. No one is showing up for them in the way that they want or deserve. And it's just, there's always issues within the whole disability community, because you also have people who really identify as activists and disability pride. And then they were fully attacking me when I started charging for my programs, as if they deserved everything to be free. And so like navigating that whole thing of like, no, like I'm offering a service and I deserve to be compensated, and I'm not a nonprofit. And navigating that whole, where I did go through this phase of like, should I just offer everything for free because these people are disabled, and do they deserve? Like, it was just, there's all sorts of different rabbit holes that people can go down within the community.
What's fascinating about that is because someone maybe has empathy or feels bad or pity that someone has a disability, they're almost convincing people that they should receive special privileges. But it's like, if you're receiving a service, there's a fee. Yeah. There's monetary compensation, because you have to, as a provider, live and thrive. And money, unfortunately, is part of that. Or maybe fortunately, depending on how you view it, part of that process.
Yeah. And I do, at first I was like, why am I being attacked? Now I know to send loving kindness and compassion towards people like that. Like, I even got an email the other day that was like, how dare you talk about going to the spa on your Instagram stories? Because a lot of Spoonies can't afford that. And I was like, okay, like, that's really not my responsibility. Like, I like, there's people at all sorts of different levels. And it's really interesting for me to look at the research that's been coming out from quantum physics and all different fields, like Dr. David Hawkins, about how we can actually measure the frequency of different emotions and levels of consciousness now. And that victim mentality, that shame and that grief, the anger is really, I know it sounds kind of new age to say like it's low vibe, but it really is. It's a different level of consciousness, and moving up towards joy takes like a series of evidence-based strategies to get there. But I really do witness Spoonies as they go through these different stages, get to the place of, I mean, enlightenment's at the very top. And I'm not about to say that I'm an enlightened person. Like, everyone goes up and down through all of these different waves of emotions, but it's really interesting to Google, what do I Google? Like, emotion frequency chart, I think, is something you can Google, and go on Google Images, and just to see the different vibrations is fascinating.
Wow. Okay. I've never heard of this, so I will absolutely be Googling it. But for listeners who are either identifying with the term Spoonie, or they have already, found that label to be helpful and this is not new information, what could someone do? What are tips and tricks, tangible tools that allow someone who, if they resonate with this definition, could start doing right now after listening that would enhance their life and make it better?
Totally. Well, I recommend going to my Instagram account, The Spoonie Mentor. And if you click the link in my bio, I have tons of free resources. I have a podcast, the Spoonie Podcast. I have a Pacing 101 workshop for Spoonies, which is really a great place to start, because I explain what spoon theory is and actual methods of pacing that are game changers in terms of really increasing your energy. And I also, what's another great, like Google spoon theory and learn about the community. I'd follow the hashtag Spoonie, because there's some great resources out there. And I'm trying to think of what else. I think one of the most important things that people go through in the early stages is accepting their diagnosis, or accepting that they are a Spoonie. And one thing I'll say about that is it's natural to grieve the loss of your health, if that's a sentence that resonates with you, and to allow yourself to feel that grief. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be confused. It's okay to be frustrated. Really honoring those feelings and letting them move through your body, journaling about them. The second most important piece for Spoonies, no matter how long you have identified as a Spoonie, is allowing yourself the time and space to rest. Most people think that they're resting, but most of the time what they're actually doing is lying in bed with racing thoughts, basically shaming themselves that they're not doing enough, or they should be doing this. You know, Brene Brown talks about don't should all over yourself. And I really think the most impactful thing on my journey, because I went from being bedridden last year to now thriving on 2-hour hikes, and it's fully because of pacing strategies. And so many of my clients have had incredible transformation stories. But the first step is always allowing ourselves to rest. And it's that level of self-compassion that so many of us struggle with, because we're not taught that. We live in a hustle culture. We've grown up being taught that our worth is attached to how productive we are. And honestly, if you ask anyone how they're doing, everyone's response is typically, I'm busy, as if that's like a badge of honor. Whereas for me, it's like I fill my days with so much rest and face masks and going to the spa and meditating and going for walks in nature and just petting my pets, my cat and dog. It's a new level of slow living that I never allowed myself to have before. And if you know that you should rest more, but you struggle to, you're not alone. My Thriving Spoonie Pathway mentorship program is 12 weeks for a reason. It takes time to work through all of these limiting beliefs, to learn the strategies, and to build connection with others. Because when we co-regulate with each other, and we can really ground our nervous systems and stay within our window of tolerances, because most Spoonies, regardless of the diagnosis, in all of my research and my graduate studies, I've realized that at the root of everything is nervous system dysregulation. So when we address that and pair that with mindset techniques for reframing, and not toxic positivity, but how do we actually look at some of the beliefs that are keeping us stuck, like rest is lazy or I'm not worthy, and how do we take advantage of all the research in neuroplasticity in order to shift our neural pathways into really believing that we are enough, that we are whole and worthy. And what's so cool is, as a result of the program, people don't only just radically increase their energy and have just way less symptoms and feel so much better in their body. They're all getting into relationships, or they're getting new jobs, or it's just, when we live in alignment in this way and really tap into our intuition, so much opens up in the world. Because I really do believe, like, as much as I'm very much evidence-based, I'm also as woo-woo as they come. And I'm all about the universe. It's like, no, the universe's only intention for us is to get back into our whole, worthy, authentic selves. So whatever brings us back into alignment, because we are created and designed to thrive. We're not here to just barely survive or be in pain. If we are in pain, it means that our body is giving us a warning sign. And most of us learn to avoid it, or to be mad at our bodies. Like, why are you showing up with pain? Whereas this is a radical shift in, thank you, body, for warning me. I'm going to rest now. And it's just developing a whole new level of self-love and compassion.
Oh my God, I love that. Like, using it as a signal of that our body is trying to look out for us. And when it signals slow down, rest, step back, it's protecting us. And I think with my diagnoses, especially the exertional compartment syndrome, I would get angry and resentful, and I would feel so much body betrayal of like, fuck you, body, for not allowing me to go on that hike or to whatever I wanted to do at that time. And so for me, that is such a powerful statement of shifting it as a thank you. I have gratitude for your communication with me versus you suck and you make my life terrible. So everything you said, there were so many layers to what you said. So I want to recap it for people. I think first and foremost, using Emily and her Instagram to get free resources is first and foremost. The other thing is like you said, like researching Spoonie theory, getting a really good understanding of what does that mean? What does it look like? A pacing schedule so that you don't lead to burnout and depletion, and you navigate life with a system in place that's going to help you to thrive. I think the other things you mentioned is like really looking at your self-limiting beliefs. How much of your belief system is impacting the suffering? Because our belief system either creates the ability to experience vitality or it leads to suffering. And so like really evaluating your belief system as you interact with your diagnosis, injury, illness, disorder, I'm lumping that all together. And also feeling your feels. Like it's, as you said, it's okay to be angry. It's okay to feel abandonment from your body or betrayal or anxiety, fear, and allowing yourself to feel it and to know that by doing so, you'll get to the other side. Like you'll be able to see the sunshine at the end of the tunnel. What did I miss? What are other tricks?
Oh, no, I mean, great job summarizing that. Yeah, no, that's absolutely, like, I guess the main point is that recognize that if you are not where you want to be, it doesn't mean that you're a failure, because as you can understand, like, there are so many layers of this and it's a journey. It's not like, there's a graphic that shows up a lot on Instagram that I love. It's like, healing is not linear. We think it's just this graph and we continually get better and better, but that's not true. No matter what type of healing you're going through, whether it's mental or physical or emotional or spiritual, it really is all encompassing. And my program is really holistic in the sense that we focus on nervous system regulation. We focus on mental and emotional resilience, but we also focus on joy and developing our intuition, because you can't treat yourself in isolation. If you have foot pain, it's not just about your foot. It's about so many other things, and really looking at us as a whole person. And just know, like, if the only thing you remember is self-compassion, that will get you so far, because so many of us are just beating ourselves up internally. And if you identify as a Spoonie, or if you're new to the Spoonie world and think that it's a community that fits with you, like, just know that you're not alone, and it's a journey. Healing is like a roller coaster of ups and downs and going backwards. Even for me, even though my life is like so much better now and my energy is way more improved and I'm like loving this life that I've built with this community, there are days that I'm also pissed off that I had to give up my career as a teacher that I loved. Like, I'm still a teacher in many ways, but of course I still grieve the life I lived, and I have so much joy and gratitude for where I am now. Like, they can coexist, and wherever you are on this beautiful, messy life journey is okay.
Well, Emily, thank you from the bottom of my heart for informing hundreds of people, thousands of people on a community that I think is very unknown. I think a lot of people, this is the first time they're going to hear these terms, understand what this community encounters and the struggles that they face. And so thank you for being an educator, for being a teacher to all of our listeners. And if you like this episode, share it with others. If there's people that come to mind of, gosh, I really think that they might resonate with this community, pass it along to your loved ones, and give us a review on Apple or Spotify. We appreciate that so much. And we'll catch everyone later.